I'm Susan Moffat. I'm a former legislative researcher. I'm a taxpayer, and I am your indefatigable email correspondent, and I bet you wish I were fatigable at this point. I just want to say up front, this is not about whether you love racing or you don't. It's about whether this is an appropriate expenditure of a large amount of public funds over a long period of time to prop up a single private for-profit enterprise, and it's about whether we have had enough time to actually understand the contracts we are signing. I appreciate all of you, and I am really sorry that you've been put in the middle of this deal, but this is where we find ourselves. Each of you, unfortunately, has to decide whether to pull the trigger on a $25 million state appropriation that could have been used to help our public schools or provide health care, which our state senator voted against. Each of you has to decide if you will play corporate favorites with huge amounts of public money that will benefit a foreign corporation over homegrown events like Austin City Limits and South by Southwest that are already bringing significant economic benefits to our community and who pay their taxes and don't get them rebated. And you have to decide whether you will be a party voting on the record to enable Susan Combs and Rick Perry's $250 million taxpayer giveaway over the next 10 years. I know City Hall is its own bubble, but many Austin families, students, teachers, administrators, myself included, have spent the last 6 months up the street fighting cuts to public education against a legislature that has failed to meet its obligation to our public schools for the first time in 60 years. Over 1,000 AISD employees right here in Austin have already been laid off. Pre-K, after-school care, community colleges, student scholarships, every facet of public education has been slashed, as well as health care for our neediest residents. The comptroller's representative at the most recent council work session said the state will not make money on F1 and that the $25 million amount was the state's break-even point. If this is true, and we can't ever really know that because the parties that benefit are producing the economic impact analysis, but if it's true, it means there won't even be a trickle-down effect at the state level. All of our tax dollars that go into this deal are going to London. Because the comptroller reversed the statutory process, now we hear possibly illegally, the Austin City Council now finds itself in a unique position to make this decision. Senator Kirk Watson, an early proponent of F1, did recently vote to strip state funding for the race, citing it as the wrong priority when we were slashing basic services. But that vote failed, and that means the ball is in your court. I hope you will show as much courage as Senator Watson, and as the Reverend said earlier, vote for the application of justice. Okay, but let's pretend that none of these very real effects for Austin families exist. Right down here at the city level, inside our little bubble, there has simply not been enough time for the public or the council to fully understand and address the potential economic, legal, environmental, or financial risks or ramifications. The Hoyt impact study has only been available for barely 72 hours. The independent review the City Commission turned out to be a one-page letter produced in less than 24 hours, according to the release dates on the city website. And that is a pretty thin analysis of a 49-page report that's going to drive a 10-year contract worth $250 million. Then we have the statutory quagmire. The section of the governing statute that covers this deal has never been used before. It was drafted just for F1. Nobody has experience with it. No case law exists to highlight potential pitfalls or guide interpretation. No one can even say with certainty that it's legal to let F1 cover the city's tax increment. And a lawsuit was filed yesterday against the comptroller for exceeding her statutory authority in promising this deal in the first place. So that brings us to the draft contracts, which have also been available for barely 72 hours and, as we just heard, are still actually being drafted. Yesterday, I sent you 6 pages of questionable clauses and unaddressed issues based on a quick read-through of the contracts as they existed yesterday. And I strongly urge you to heed the advice of Auto Week and retain an outside counsel that is specifically experienced in racing contracts before you sign off on this. I'm just going to hit a couple of the major contract problems. The clause in Section 18 that lets the local organizing committee modify any of its responsibilities, including payment provisions, simply by notifying the city and the comptroller. We don't have to give their permission. The clause that delegates the city's interest to a group of people handpicked by the applicant's agent with only one city appointee who doesn't have voting rights. And I think this is arguably a unconstitutional delegation of legal authority, but I guess we can wait and see if anybody else sues over that. And finally, my favorite, Section 15, which once you check all the numbered cross-section references, actually says that even if the city terminates its contract with the local organizing committee for cause, we are still on the hook for the overall deal, and the comptroller gets to continue scraping off our tax increment for the life of the contract. Plus, there are no enforceable environmental provisions in the contracts as they stood yesterday. Meeby-weeby provisions aren't solid. Nobody in the public has seen these things yet. But despite all of that and all of those unanswered questions, if you approve this item as posted today, none of these draft contracts or identified risks, problems, questions, whatever, will come back to council or the public. There will be no final public review, no public hearing, no final council vote. We're all just going to cross our fingers and hope for the best. This is crazy. I do not believe any of you as intelligent adults would buy a house in this manner or conduct any other business deal like this. You don't sign until you can see what you're actually signing. You have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of Austin, not to Bernie Ecclestone, and you must at least slow this thing down enough so we have a chance to identify and address all the legal, financial, and environmental risks to the best of our ability. And again, you really need experienced counsel with racing contracts. We have to also ensure that all the final documents come back to the public and the council for final review and approval. With this many loose ends, postponement is clearly the only rational course, but I think Dutch Mandel, editorial director of Auto Week, had a better idea. In an editorial posted yesterday in America's largest racing magazine, Mandel said, "I have 2 words for the Austin City Council and its constituents before Thursday's vote to bless the proposed 2012 Austin Grand Prix: run away." The bottom line is that if F1 has a decent business plan and can come here on his own dime, absolutely hang out the welcome. But if not, it's not a good investment for our tax dollars. Again, you have my sympathy. I am sorry you've all ended up in the middle on this, but please do the right thing and at least postpone this until we can figure out what the heck we're signing on for. Thank you.